Welcome back to Breaking News, everyone. We are covering the death of U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens. He was killed yesterday in an apparent rocket attack as he left the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. There's been a great deal of violence across the region over the last 24 hours. Demonstrations in Cairo and in Benghazi, apparently in response to an anti-Muslim video that had been circulating in the region.
We just want to open this up to the panel, and we have Jamie Rubin here sitting with this former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State. Jump in.
So, Jamie, I have a question for you. How do you keep Americans focused on something like this when it doesn't turn out the way we thought it was? We went in, we're helpers, everything is going to be better. It's not better. How do you keep us from changing the channel, as everybody says? Because we get bored when it doesn't work the way we want it to.
That's the responsibility of the government, I do believe, in large part, and responsible members of Congress, both parties, those who have a claim to have an interest or a focus on international affairs. That's their job. Their job it is to keep forcing those who should be paying attention to pay attention. That means having high-level officials go visit. That means allocating enough funds for security, for foreign assistance programs. That means asking the Treasury Department, all the departments of the U.S. government, to see what we can do. That means getting the United Nations to make sure that its officials, the British government, the French government, this is the essence of foreign policy, is to prevent the sort of stasis or inertia that will naturally occur and redirect resources and focus and energy. And it's hard, and I wouldn't be candid if I didn't say it was hard. I remember on just a very small piece of land we used to call Kosovo, a tiny place, a couple million people. The Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, and the Secretary of Defense on this tiny place had to really have a time 2 or 3 times a week to speak, to go through all the issues, to keep our attention focused on it, to keep their department's attention focused on it. And that was a small place where Americans were welcomed. So, you know, whether it was Afghanistan after that, or then Iraq, or now Libya, these problems are bigger and bigger and more complicated. But that's the job of both the administration and the responsible members of Congress. I would like to think the news media, you know, would keep some interest involved, but they tend, like everyone, to turn the channel to what the latest development.
Well, hang on a second. A lot of people this morning are talking about how an apparent film, a video, an almost amateurish video made in the United States can reverberate around the world, from Benghazi to Cairo, then all the way back here, then back to Benghazi again. Speaker Newt Gingrich was with us a little while ago. He talked about this. Let's listen to a sound from him.
We're a country that believes in religious liberty. We believe in freedom of speech. How can the U.S. government apologize for a film no one has seen, which is what the embassy in Cairo did yesterday? This is part of a much longer struggle, and I think you have to connect these larger dots. It's not just about an event in Libya. It's about a longer war, part of which we were being reminded of yesterday on 9/11.
Comments?
Well, Brooke talked about earlier about the politics, the ping pong of politics. I want to set that aside. This is an important conversation to have with outside the realm of a political race. And Jamie, you brought this up earlier, the fact that this has shown light on some of the troubles at home and how we handle the free speech issues. You've worked for the State Department under Bill Clinton. The statements that came out of the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, were these the right response? We know, John, we talked about this. This came out before the protest and rally on the grounds of the embassy in Egypt. But was this statement the appropriate statement to hear from our government?
I've read parts of it that you kindly shared with me. I don't know that I've read it all, but I still think we can have the conversation. Look, my guess is what happened is that information started being passed around that a Islamic extremist group inside Egypt was circulating this video, was stirring the pot, was showing it to TV stations, was asking the U.S. Embassy for comment. What's your view of this video? How come you, the U.S. government, didn't stop them from making this the way they imagined we could? Because they're not sophisticated. And so an embassy official said, we've got to figure out a way to disassociate the United States from this video, because this wasn't the first time. We had, as we mentioned earlier, the Terry Jones incident, where a burning of the Koran was used in Pakistan and Afghanistan in the same way to stir up trouble. When we say there's a war, there's 2 sets of warriors. Terry Jones is a warrior. he is trying to create a civilizational war, just as much as the preacher in Libya or the preacher in Egypt who's shouting at his mob on the street. He's a warrior. But Terry Jones is a warrior, too. When you take when you burn a Quran, or when you make a movie that's designed and intended to offend, you're a warrior. So how do we deal with these warriors? I'm not sure they got the nuances right. I suspect they could have made clearer, but because they did make it, but they should have made clearer that while we support free speech, and that is what our country's all about, we weren't involved in this
thing.
thing.
The thing that we're talking about is here in the Wall Street Journal, at least in part, reads, respect for religious beliefs is a cornerstone of American democracy. We firmly reject the actions of those who abuse the universal right of free speech to hurt the religious beliefs of others, talking about the maker of this film.
So they're trying to find a way to disassociate the United States government from this film, because...
But can't that be seen as being soft or placating a potential response?
Well, it has been seen that way. It's become a football. I'm not sure that I think it's correct to try to disassociate the United States from these kind of films, from the book burning. Remember, the President of the United States had to get on the, I believe, make a public statement when a U.S. soldier accidentally burned Qurans, you know. So you have to find the right level and the right way to do it.
I guess where he gives justification.
Gentlemen, let me just interject a quick time out of the conversation, because I want to go to Elise Labott. She's getting more information for us. Of course, she knew Ambassador Stephens for 10 years. Elise, what more are you learning?
Well, basically, we're learning just about the fact that the State Department, after hours and hours of reporting on Chris Stephens and other U.S. diplomatic officers in this ground in Benghazi being killed, the State Department and the President and Secretary Clinton now confirming that they're dead. Another name that Secretary Clinton put out is Sam Smith, an officer at the State Department. We don't know. A lot of information is coming out about them right now. But right now, Brooke, all hands on deck to try and make sure that U.S. diplomatic facilities are secure in the wake of what happened overnight in Libya, and also what happened yesterday in Cairo and everything we've been talking about. I mean, one of the main tenets of the U.S. Working in these countries is these countries have a responsibility as a host government to make sure those diplomatic facilities are secure. So right now what the State Department is doing is dealing with the immediate matters at hand. I mean, there'll be plenty of time over the coming hours, days, and weeks to talk about how U.S. policy is going to be affected, and I think it's going to be dramatically affected in many ways on how the U.S. approaches the region. But right now, it's making sure that the families of these men and women are notified, that the bodies are on their way back, the remains are on their way back, helping the families in any way they can, and making sure that all U.S. diplomatic facilities and personnel specifically are protected.
Elise, I'm wondering if you can help clear up something that's at least been confusing to me over the last few hours. Yesterday, we had heard that there was a death at the U.S. consulate of an embassy official in Benghazi. Is this the same incident then? Is that death Christopher Stephens, or were there two separate incidents here?
It sounds to me, and again, I mean, you know, even my sources who normally are very good about picking up the phone, everyone's really hunkered down right now. It sounds to me, because when I left last night, the State Department, I was specifically told that it was not Chris Stephens. I specifically said, it's not Chris Stephens, is it? Because it's someone that I knew very well, and obviously I wasn't even sure that he was in Benghazi, and I was told, no, it's not Chris Stephens. And so it sounds to me like there were two incidents from what we've been able to piece together, and again, this hasn't been confirmed. It sounds like there was a U.S. Officer that was killed, a U.S. Foreign Service officer killed. They were notifying the family. And then, as they were trying to get these other diplomatic personnel, including Chris Stephens, to safety, it sounds like that there was another attack.
Elise Labott, thank you. Stand by. We're going to come back to you. But I want to bring in Jumana Karaj, because she's on the phone. She's been on the phone with us from Tripoli. And let's just rephrase, you know, your same question, John Berman, because it's an excellent one, as we've been reporting on this one death, Jumana, in Benghazi. And we learned of that late last night. Now we're learning about Ambassador Stephens' death, in addition to these three others who, according to your sources, you know, saw their bodies there in Benghazi. Do you know, are these two separate instances or not?
These are conflicting reports. We are hearing from the Deputy Interior Minister for the Eastern region, that is where Benghazi is, that there were two separate incidents that took place, but that seemed to be dismissed by the Libyan Prime Minister when he was asked about it in a news conference a little earlier. They said that the details of the attack and what happened will come out as soon as the investigation is done. They refused to go into the details of what happened, but we do know that the consulate was struck by rocket-propelled grenades, according to eyewitnesses and what we're hearing today from security sources. So it is a matter of waiting to see if the Libyan government does later on today or later on does release more information about how this happened.
Okay, Jumana, thank you very much for us in Tripoli this morning. Again, we have learned of the death of Ambassador Stephens, and also according to the statement from Secretary Clinton, Sean Smith had worked with the Foreign Service of Information Management, and he was a husband and a father of two. Much more on the breaking news after this quick break.